what type of value can you generate if I provide you those technical capabilities?
So this enables us to give access water to a wider population with these new approaches when we're deploying such solutions.
I've got a question regarding the startup ecosystem in Africa. Welcome to the Internet of Things Equation podcast. I'm your host, Łukasz Malinowski, and let's get started with today's conversation. In this conversation, we covered how IoT can unlock the potential in Africa, how we can apply IoT technology to increase the quality of living of people and generate business outcomes. My guest, Kinoti Gituma, the managing director of Kingfin, shared a number of insightful insights on how IoT can generate value, what are the challenges and opportunities of using modern technology in Africa to generate value for everyone. I do believe that you will find this conversation very interesting. We started as IoT network infrastructure focused on connectivity in Africa using LPWAN, satellite and cellular, and then you extended your offering enabling business models to leverage IoT solutions, including hardware, software, and cloud. So this is pretty comprehensive journey, starting from connectivity itself all the way to the business impact. Maybe you could provide us a bit more details about your story, how you had started and how it evolved over the years.
All right, Lucas, thank you very much for that. So my journey obviously is a long one. I started out around websites a long time ago. What interested me was data. What always fascinates me is data. I always believe whatever you're trying to get insights on, you must have a platform for data. This prompted my curiosity and actually left continent, left Kenya, went to study in the US. And I focused on I took my master's in electronic commerce, electric business. For me, I wanted a formal foundation. I got to work for a Fortune 100 company and ran an e-commerce store, which was very robust, generating about $40 million. And for us to be able to push and get insights in terms of our ops, data was very crucial. So very early on my career, I was very interested in data. And then after working for about a decade in the US, I relocated with that insight. And the most important thing when coming back home was to try and understand how can we start gathering data about businesses because the infrastructure was not there, the knowledge was not there. And we were in a situation where in this continent, everything is touchy-feely. If you try to sell something, people want to see. So it's very hard to try and sell solutions around data because it's not tangible, so to speak. So as I went around the market, and the problems were presented. I remember in my career consulting for a client in oil and gas, and they all wanted to monitor LPG tanks. That now created a shift from the digital world, moving to the physical world and trying to get data so you can do that. So I think I was forced by circumstances to say, now I have to go to IoT because we have legacy systems. We need to understand, we need to set up a baseline, so to speak, to be able to get meaningful data in terms of that. So long story short, that solution of monitoring LPG tanks across the country was a big challenge. I did find a solution, but it was not, as you say, when you look at the cost benefit analysis of monitoring that LPG tank as opposed to the cost of deploying that solution. So I was thrown into the deep end. And then that's when now I started now looking at maybe more affordable networks. And not only affordable networks that make sense for Africa. So you find what they say, I'm sure Lucas, is maybe about 60% of the earth is connected. 80%, 85 is not, especially in Africa. So we had to find solutions like LPWAN that are affordable, that you can quickly deploy private networks, connect and get some data on that. Okay. The other thing also in very remote areas where there wasn't terrestrial connectivity or even cellular, we had to augment it. So for me, the learning is IoT is just about gathering data, at least from where I sit, and get that data. You want to use it to make get insightful information about your operations, depending on which industry you're in. And then not only get insightful information in terms of a snapshot, but now with all these new sexy phrases of AI, you want to predict the future and know what's going to happen so that you're prepared. So I think for me, it's a very fascinating field because it's factual and it's data. And I think that in summary, I can give you insight in my journey.
That's very similar to how I look at it because IoT is just an enabler. It allows you to gather data from surroundings of your devices, right? And then based on that data, you can run some analytics. But before you can run those analytics, you need to somehow transfer data from the edge to the backend system, cloud or whatever else backend. I really like what you stated, that you found a solution, but that solution was not applicable from the business standpoint. Because for the connectivity, to keep those devices operational, to keep the backend up and running, and if you add all of those little costs together, and you realize that you pay more for the IoT infrastructure than the benefit that it generates, this is the wrong way to go. And actually, based on my experience, lots of companies forget about doing that calculation upfront. They deploy something and they claim that IoT does not work because they are losing money. That shows your experience in this area, that you do the math upfront and then decide whether it is good way or bad way. Could you give us a bit more details on the cost factors? Because you said that the solution that you found was too expensive. Was that for the connectivity only, or maybe for devices, or maybe there was some subscription fee that was too expensive for the whole business case to make sense?
As you know, here we rely on double gas tanks. Have gas. We don't have piped gas in most regions of Africa. So we rely on those LPG tanks. So the cost of manufacturing that LPG tank and the cost of losing it, the business case was to try and stop the theft of those LPG tanks. Vis-a-vis, come with a solution where you can track it nationwide. So you put a tracker on that LPG tank and you want to track. So when we did the numbers, because my background, even in when I was doing basics in e-commerce, you always look at, in e-commerce, they call it return on advertising spend. In normal business, we say return on investment. So you want to look at the cost of monitoring that LPG tank across, say, the country, as opposed to coming with a solution where you put the tracker, you put the network and the applications to monitor that. Is it cost effective in terms of the cost of the LPG tank? So if it's a high value item, maybe it makes sense because the solution is there. But as you rightly said, when we did now the modeling of the return on investment, find the cost of tracking that LPG tank was higher than the tank itself. So it defeats the purpose. Why do you want to track LPG tank that's a certain price and your cost of tracking? And with time, I think obviously with technology and all these things, it will fall. But at the present time, when we're doing that business case, it did make sense in terms of what we wanted to do.
And that was only tracking of the location, not how full that tank was. Is that correct? So you just wanted to know where that tank is on a map.
We wanted to know if this tank or this asset went into the wrong hands, they would be able to track and get it. In terms of theft, because what was happening in the biggest challenge is there was a lot of for those LPG tanks, and they would want to know where were they being taken. So you can imagine it was quite a big ask for an LPG tank, and the cost at that time. Yes, you could get the price trackers and do that, but the whole cost of the operation at that time seemed way too expensive. And some of the solutions that they tried at that time in terms of RFID tags were not that robust in terms of actually knowing, because once you deploy something like RFID tag, it has to be in a controlled environment, right? But now, once it goes out into the market, that's not a controlled environment, and therefore you cannot track the device, and you cannot do that. However, if you have, maybe think of it, let's say be aggressive and say we want to put a satellite into that device. What would be the cost of that device, and what would be the cost of the satellite comms to know? And then things like issues like latency. All right. What about if maybe you say let us use maybe cellular or GSM to connect? What happens if that asset goes into that area where there is a GSM? So those are the things we had to look at, the cost benefit analysis in terms of trying to monitor that LPG. So I'm still hoping one day I'll have a cost-effective solutions as the prices drop.
You mentioned a few very important topics. One is that after you deploy your device to the actual field, you're out of the control, right? Customer owns that device or got full access to that device. So RFID is not really an answer for that case because it doesn't provide you long range capabilities to track that specific device. Then all of those aspects related to network coverage, for instance, as you said, if there is no cellular coverage, then your device is essentially lost. It cannot communicate at all. Satellite helps, but helps at the cost. And as you rightly pointed out, if the asset is not of high value, probably using satellite to track it, it's not the best idea. Do you think that LPWAN is the sweet spot and is the answer for those use cases, or you got better idea to solve them?
I always say start with the use case, understand it in terms of offering expertise. What geographical location are you looking at? What assets are you looking at? What's the distance? How frequently do you want to get the data updated? That kind of thing. And then now you can make a recommendation based on which network is best. So I wouldn't say LPWAN is the go-to network, but it is our anchor network in terms of trying to solve a lot of the issues we have in this continent. Where we are saying, okay, maybe you don't need real-time data, but you need data all the same. Maybe it's over a long distance, and maybe you don't want to put in a lot of wiring. As you know, we in LP1 we want to focus on the wireless parts of the sensors. So when we put all those factors, that's when we decide which is the ideal network, and then we work in terms of deploying the solutions around that. So we find a lot of the use cases and the challenges that we're meeting. LP1 is a good launchpad to try and start monitoring these devices within the use case. Another thing is also how far do you want to go? You find a lot of people, maybe it's confined to their area of operation. Could be a farm that just wants data around their farming activities, right? Could be a factory or a mining operation. They want data around. So you don't have to worry about cellular infrastructure having reached the beauty of LPWAN. You can go and deploy your own private network and then obviously put different use cases there and deploy your solution. So we just feel in terms of demand, most of the use cases brought onto our table, you find LP1 would be a quick solution, but it does not confine it to that network. There are many other options depending on what you want.
I think that's a great mindset. Start with the business use case, the business requirement, or actually even the business goal, right? And then you go all the way down from the business goal to the implementation, which might use one type of connectivity, or it might use a few types of connectivities mixed with each other. So I think this is great approach. You mentioned farming, mining. What are the IoT use cases that you see got the biggest potential in Africa currently and in the near future?
So certainly for me, I think Africa is a continent that has vast natural resources. So if we even look at things like utilities, we can focus on things like hydroelectric power runoff. If you look at monitoring utilities like smart water metering, there's a lot of opportunities around that. And to manage these resources, we have had analog solutions, so to speak, manual meters, so to speak. And what we want to do is encourage because some of these things are helping us with our goals in terms of providing things like clean water to people. When you have these manual meters, and now we are thinking of transitioning to say digital meters, there are things we can do. We can bring in prepaid meters. Case in point is some of the challenges we've seen is when you have these monthly bills for utilities, a majority of people earn daily wages. There's a higher propensity of defaulting if you're going to pay monthly. But if we come in with these digital meters and install prepaid options and you pay based per use, then it is unlikely for you to default when you get a monthly bill because you're paying based on your usage and you manage yourself. So this enables us to give access water to a wider population with these new approaches when we're deploying such solutions. So I think the opportunities for me obviously is basic things like agriculture, trying to enhance our food basket, being more efficient with the population boom in Africa. We now have to be more resourceful in terms of how we grow our crops, the time to market, the supply chain. So certainly agriculture, utilities, and logistics, they are all intertwined and play a great role. And you'll find, at least from where I sit, a lot of the use cases being brought onto our table in terms of offering solutions are around those three. But it doesn't stop us. We have unique flora and fauna in Africa with wildlife management. So there's some very interesting, unique cases for Africa, like monitoring wildlife, endangered species, human wildlife conflict management, and some of these solutions can come in quite handy around Africa, especially in the national parks.
I think that monitoring of wildlife, this is perfect deployment for IoT. And this is not obvious one, because everyone, at least in Europe or US, like we are focused on factories or cars or all of that stuff, right? But we
Yes,
forget that there is more to it than just a factory, and wildlife. This is something that is of a huge value on its own, and you cannot count that value in terms of money. Right? It's basically something that we should preserve, and deploying IoT technology in those use cases, from my personal standpoint, that makes tons of value, and this is actually why that the technology exists in the first place. And you mentioned also access to utilities and that prepaid approach, which is also very convenient because once you've got connected meters, labor is not required for someone to go and check that meter anymore. Now you can offer those utilities to broader population because of efficiency that you introduced to the whole system. Do you think that IoT can contribute to the economic growth of Africa? Because Africa in general, this is very young population and you've got, as you said, a huge potential in terms of resources. Hopefully, the IoT technology can contribute to increase quality of life of people and generate some economic growth in Africa. How do you think about it?
obviously, I think like we started off with our conversation about the basics. We're trying to be informed, get data, so we are more informed about our operations. The saying goes, knowledge is power. So if we have knowledge about our operations, insights, then we're able to make decisions. I always say we have a population of about 8 billion people. We're doing a very good thing connecting. And in Africa, we've leapfrogged some technologies like the computers by using cell phones. So you'll find internet access or access to information or knowledge is through the phone. So what we want to do now is their devices, and we want devices connected so that we can also get data. Those devices are growing in leaps and bounds. They're in the billions, and they're growing every day. Now, whatever we are trying to do, be it logistics, be it our operations, we want to get insights so that we can be more efficient, so that we can get data, so that we can make decisions. And not only stop at just getting those decisions, also predict where we're going in terms of what we want to do. Because we are becoming very knowledge hungry in terms of getting insights. so that we can be more efficient. So there's this ecosystem of getting data, and it's going to be powered with even these new things around AI, machine learning, predictive outcomes about whatever, even having digital twins or digital replicas of your operation, maybe in very remote areas, so that maybe you can do simulations or digital simulations, so that you can try and see what if scenarios in the future, so that you can try and understand the direction. So for me, with data being, as they say, the new oil or the new currency in terms of doing that, whatever we're trying to do, if you have more insights and information about your operations, you stand out a better chance in terms of competing or being competitive in the market. So for me, I'm happy in my career. Data has been the bedrock of making decisions about it. And I think if I can pass through our organization, Kingfin, in terms of helping companies, industries understand that they can harness power of data to be more informed about their operations, to be more efficient, to make even the world better place in terms of the technologies that we deploy, in terms of even hitting the UN SDG goals. This is like just providing access to clean water, SDG 6. So those are some of the things that encourage us to reach this gospel of let's get more insights about your operations so that you make the right decisions and you also can focus where you're going.
You mentioned something very important that actually triggered a question on my side, that knowledge is the
Yes.
power. And what do you think about education? Because what I try to do personally is I try to educate young developers on the potential of IoT and also on how they can leverage IoT to solve real life challenges. How do you find IoT or IT education in Africa in terms of current state? Do you think that there is something that we as IT professionals can do to help young people in Africa to get, first of all, the awareness of what is possible, and then to show them how they can achieve the goals they are thinking about?
That's actually a very good question. And I wouldn't even just confine it to the young people of Africa. I'll just say to the market in Africa generally. There's a lot of work to be done around sharing knowledge about how you can use data in making informed decisions. And for me, in as much as I'm in a business, one of my CSR goals is to provide a platform for these young people to learn about, probably look for partners across the divide. Could be private sector, could be government, where we want to enhance their knowledge in terms of deploying these solutions from a technical point of view, understanding data, because there are new skill sets that are required when you deploy such solutions. These days, we are looking for data analysts, data scientists, that kind of thing. So even when you go to an organization and you want to change and go through a digital transformation, and IoT is core, I always say there's the hardware, which is the infrastructure and equipment, but there's also the software, which are the people. And you have to manage that transition in terms of now new skill sets, new requirements, and move from the analog approach to the new digital way of handling. So certainly a great part of my work, I would say 60 to 7% of my work is trying to educate the market on the potential of IoT. And then once they get an understanding, is when now you can say, hey, these are the things you can do. These are the steps you can take to be able to be more informed about your operations, be it your farm, be it your utility company. There aren't very experienced people in the IoT you can lean on. And the beauty about IoT is it's something you can't go alone. So if you look at our business model in terms of reaching out to the different markets in Africa, it's based on a partner ecosystem. And we believe in the power of numbers, you know. So the more you work with partners, I like to use this example from our community. When you're hunting a buffalo, it's easier when you go as a pack of wolves as opposed to a lone animal. So there are all these components, and the market needs to be educated So a lot of my work, even as I've gone into this business the last 5 years, has been educating the market about the potential of getting insights, about getting information about your operations, whatever vertical you may be in. So there's a big gap and there's a lot of potential to bring in the youth with new skill sets that can enhance their savviness around technology. And I believe it's something that has to be worked in concerted efforts with others. It cannot be a solo effort. In as much as I'm trying to run a business, I may need to reach out to government operatives to create that conducive environment where you foster learning. And then from that learning, there's actually a career that you can make out of it. And if you build that ecosystem and you're open to knowledge and information, you are bound to succeed because for me, it's a numbers game. You can't go it alone.
I look at it from a bit different perspective that IoT is such a vast domain and such a complex domain that there is no way you can know everything about it. And to your point, you need to work with partners that are experts in their domain, let's say in the connectivity. You need to work with partners that are experts, let's say, in the cloud infrastructure. And you bring your software skills, for instance, and together you can create the end-to-end solution. And like any one of you cannot provide the actual business outcome. You need to work together and building that partner ecosystem. This is crucial. This is what I see across the board, that it is just too complex domain to try to solve everything yourself. And by helping others, by educating others, you create that community that grows into the partner ecosystem. You briefly touched about the government. Do you see any help from government in terms of building that potential, building the education capabilities, maybe through the startup ecosystem, or it is not yet that government is aware of potential of IoT in Africa?
We are ambitious in that we are trying to offer our solutions in all the 54 countries. All those countries, the scenario is different. And I like to use the example of maybe regulation when you think of Starlink being brought into Africa. You find that some countries are very open and receptive, and in some countries, they're quite hostile and want to protect the ecosystem. So the beauty about building this partner ecosystem is your partners will be able to assess and tell you the best approach in terms of your operations. Depending on which government you can go to in terms of pitching some of the solutions, there's some areas you'll receive open arms. There's some others where it'll take time to penetrate. I have had situations where I've talked to people about 5 years ago, and now is when they're coming around and say, "Oh, now I remember what you were trying to tell us. Is this something now we can start talking about and discussing in terms of looking at solutions in our region?" So certainly it varies from country to country. And with that Starlink example, it can tell you some people are open to new technology. Some people are more cautious in terms of embracing new technology.
And this is the education and awareness part that you just provided perfect example of. You keep educating people, you keep showing the art of possible, but it takes time to sink in. It takes time for them to feel, really understand what you're talking about, right? And then they will come back to you and say, okay, now I am ready to cooperate with you. Let's build something meaningful together. So I'm very, very open into education and into showing the art of possible, because that's the only way that we can increase the true adoption of IoT. Because otherwise, if we keep, all that secret knowledge to ourselves, then there is very, very little value of it.
And just to add, Lucas, I also think IoT is a very practical field. It's not something sexy where we give nice presentations and do nice webinars. I always talk to my potential partners and say, get an IoT kit, test these things and see the data for yourself. See how the devices are talking to themselves. See the data for yourselves. And like I told you about this continent, people really believe touchy feely. So anytime I'm talking to potential partners, I always tell them, have this, even if it's not a full blown solution, even if it's not a full pilot, have proof of value on the ground that you can showcase because it's a very practical, hands on field. It is not something you convince people by doing very nice presentations and webinars. I think it's a very hands on, practical. And those who actually embrace and listen and actually do this actually get more excited and they come back to you with even more ideas in terms of what they want to do in terms of their ambitions of getting there. So I always say there's the theory, but there's also the practical intelligence from deploying these kits on the ground.
That's a great statement. And this is something I observed across the board, actually, that customers want to touch and feel the solution. They don't want me to show perfect presentation. They want to, connect those devices basically as soon as possible, see the data flowing. They accept that this is not a perfect solution. What you mentioned, a proof of value, this is crucial. So we are not talking about proof of concept because the concept is already
Yeah.
proven, right? We are talking about proof of value,
Yes.
which means what type of value can you generate if I provide you those technical capabilities. This is what you perfectly presented, that you got the customers, they want to touch and feel your solution, and then they will come up with how to apply that technical capability into ways that neither myself or you can never imagine, because they know their domains, right? They are experts in their fields. They don't have to be IT savvy. They just need to play with that functionality, take a look at the data, and then they will figure out very innovative way how to apply that to increase the business outcomes, to increase quality of life of people. So I think that's a great advice, that we should start with something and let the end user invent based on that capability.
Indeed. Indeed.
I've got a question regarding the startup ecosystem in Africa. Do you see a lot of startups appearing on the scene, or maybe it is too early for that because we need to invest into the base education before that can enable that growth of startups in your country?
So, like I said, I have ideas where you need to work with other stakeholders to provide a platform where maybe, for example, there would be investments in a LoRaWAN network. And then maybe you have ambitions or goals to set up a smart city, or you want to transform your town or your place or your supermarket or your building into smart. It starts with having that network, for example, and then letting people know, listen, if these are our smart city ambitions, we can connect different verticals in this city. Maybe you can open up and say, we want solutions about on the application end for smart parking, or we want solutions around intelligence transport system. We have a task in terms of making sure also you're providing the quality networks, which are secure such that when you now open that ecosystem and say, listen, we are opening up smart city solutions. We are using a premium grade network. And now you can come in and experiment, not only on the software end in terms of opportunities. We also have ambitions in Africa. We want to have made in Africa devices. So there's the opportunity around the hardware also. So that whole ecosystem from the devices, the hardware to the networks, to the applications, we want room for growth and not just confine it, say, to startups. They could be very established hardware companies that have been manufacturing other devices, and we want to tell them, hey, use that experience to come and manufacture IoT devices. You could be a software company that have been building different software for different solutions across the board and say, now there's an ecosystem where we can thrive if you build an application you use based on this method. So for me, I would not say confine it just to startups, because startups, they are learning, they're new. They could be also established SMEs that can add a lot of value to that ecosystem. So in my goal, as I said, is also in terms of CSR is find these proof of value areas where you build that ecosystem, and then you let the market thrive by saying, listen, there's this network, there are these things you can do. Start doing that. Build your hardware devices, build your application, and everyone is happy. It's not confined just to the startups. Startups bring a lot of drive and energy, but you also have our established and experienced businesses. When I'm setting up a partner ecosystem, I'll be very honest, I tend to want somebody who has been in the market. They understand their use case. For example, if you've been in selling solar power generated devices and you want to monitor across your ecosystem, that's somebody who will add value to my network in terms of providing insights. So for me, the opportunity from a business point of view is for everyone. If startups can come in and have their new ideas in terms of how to use that network, well and good. But if you also have established SMEs that have been very strong, then they can help build their own ecosystem. And we have unique situations. Like I said, maybe in Europe, you're not focusing so much on things like wildlife management, right? Or human wildlife conflict, like we are in some parts of Africa. So there's some unique scenarios in Africa where we actually have to build our own solutions around IoT. And for me, I invite anyone and everyone into that ecosystem. That would be my ideal situation. The startups to the more experienced companies, everyone who can offer something of value into that platform.
I think this is very open-minded approach that you see how every player in the field brings their unique values. Like startups got some crazy ideas, but without established companies that know the market, know the challenges of day-to-day operations, you cannot really provide any meaningful value. I think this is great mindset that you got, that you want to create a platform, ecosystem of all of those actors, enable them to build something meaningful together. So we are heading into the end of 2024. What's your wish for 2025 in terms of IoT and Africa in general?
I have very ambitious goals for Africa. Maybe it has come out during the presentation. I don't want us to just be a market. I also want us to be innovators in this space. In as much as my company, Kingfin, we are a solutions distributor. My ambition is to see, starting next year, where we are building an infrastructure around African products, be it from the application end or even from the device end. And if we can sow the seed of creating that bedrock by reaching out to other stakeholders, be it in government, be it other people in private sectors. That's what I want to see, where we have our own unique products. I think in terms of opportunities, Africa has the biggest potential. The other markets may be a little bit ahead in terms of maturity, but as you like, in terms of opportunities, we have a lot of potential. But I wouldn't want to lose out that potential where we are outsourcing everything externally. We need homegrown industries to flourish. And if we have a stake in that homegrown industry and we're able to produce devices of international standard that we can also export to other countries, to me, that is a big step. Of course, it is a lot of hard work that needs to be done. But for me, if we start identifying unique African solutions with our own solutions, of course, learning from the wider market, I think that's where I see the future of Africa in terms of managing our destiny by having our own homegrown solutions. And it's possible. And I've seen it on the ground. And I'm very encouraged by some of the things I'm seeing some of the companies doing in this region.
That is a really, really good approach and long-term vision, how to make actual impact, positive impact on the global scheme. Kinoti, Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and meeting with me today. Final question, what's the best way for people to reach out to you to ask you about IoT, maybe to join your IoT ecosystem?
Thank you very much, Lucas. It's been a pleasure engaging with you. We have our website, www.kingfin.net. And through that website, you'll be able to reach out for solutions if you're a potential partner in a different country in Africa. We also have our social media links on Twitter. We are at info@Kingfin. And LinkedIn, we're also available. So there are ways to reach out. And we're also on WhatsApp. There's a WhatsApp link on our website. So I encourage anyone who wants to explore and learn and take this journey of learning about IoT in Africa to visit our URL, www.kingfin.net. And we would be happy to engage with you, to learn with you, and to also learn from you. And hopefully, you can also learn from us in terms of our experience, in terms of offering these solutions in the African market. Thank you so much, Lucas.
Thank you so much. And I strongly recommend everyone to check your webpage and learn with you, engage with you, and make the world a better place by leveraging IoT technology. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for listening. Go to the thingrex.com to find more materials about the Internet of Things domain. I'm your host, Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer.